The death of God is about the drying up of a horizon of meaning and of a whole form of human life.
Where do we stand in the illusion it makes? What kind of space are we invited into?
The material relations between people become social relations between things. When we look at toasters, corn, and TVs, we
still, to a large extent, live in the interregnum between worlds, if you will, or between paradigms. Not many people in the history of the world have faced that.
Zero Squared is the Zero Books podcast. Daniel Coffeen is a sophist, rhetor, and a philosopher, if your definition of philosophy includes playing around with ideas. He's a regular guest on this podcast and has appeared on many others, including the Partially Examined Life podcast. And he's the author of the Zero Books title, Reading the Way of Things. I'm glad to have him back on. Daniel Coffeen, welcome to the Zero Books podcast again.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. And it's we need to do it more often because you're good with the gab. You can help me create these podcasts.
I am a gabber. Which is funny because I went through a period, and I'm still kind of in this period where I was like, you know what? I want to be the silent, most boring person in the room. And that was my obsession for a little while. And I did introduce the ability to shut the fuck up and actually not jabber on like the Jew know-it-all that I am. But you know what? It turns out you roll the way you roll. So, I gab, I jab, I do what I do. Yeah.
I actually want to talk to you a little bit about that because it's something that I think that I could learn. I think that this desire for attention and to be at the center has sort of defined my life. And at the moment, I feel like internally I'm actually beyond that. I don't really care. But I nonetheless find myself sort of automatically, unconsciously going into a performance mode, especially when I'm meeting people for the first time.
Yeah. It's something I became obsessed with this about a year ago, right? And it's shtick, right? You go into the shtick. I referred to it at one point as, your sort of scaffolding. The sort of go-to things you have to sort of tether your identity. And that without them, you feel like you can't stand up straight, right? They're the things that hold up the structure. But then you start grasping onto those things more and more. And maybe, I'm getting older, I'm getting tired, right? I don't always want to be I don't have that vitality to be the center of the room going on and on and on. So what happens, And for me, I had a little bit of a collapse. I was like, I can't keep doing this. My body won't allow it. One reason I began shying away from the social is precisely the relentless will to perform. Put on a show. I called it the Jew Clown Show. In my Berkeley lectures, I always called it the Jew Clown Show. Mm-hmm. They just watch the funny Jew say shit up on stage, right? Yeah. And at some point, it became more and more manic, right? I think and those lectures that they in many ways were quite successful, and I'm proud of those lectures. But I think if I taught now, it'd be kind of different. A little more. Probably listen a little more adamant, and a little less know-it-all-y.
I wish I knew what my act was. I fear that if I had to label my act, it would not be as complimentary to myself as yours is, and yours isn't exactly, a raving endorsement, but
it's filled with self-loathing. In case that's not true. I actually, I wrote a piece about this relatively recently. The idea of having a worthy witness, and I always had this image of, myself and the sort of ideal. Really came from being 21, living in Manhattan, sitting in my little room reading Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard, and Abraham on the mountaintop, faced with this sort of absurd challenge and facing it, right? And what blows Kierkegaard away, right, is that Abraham has no anxiety about it, right? He's just absolutely outside the social. That's the whole premise, right, of faith. Kierkegaard is that it takes leave of the ethical, takes leave of the social. And then Abraham, it just goes right up the mountain completely. He's going to murder his son. He can't be more outside the social than that.
Right.
And he has no anxiety about it. And then then you get to Nietzsche. Nietzsche, it's having the strength to be on the mountaintop. Who can breathe the cold air on the mountaintop? And so, and then at some point, I really doubled down on just leading a life of solitude, as much as one can with a kid. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? Maybe this is not right. Something was missing. And then I started, sort of fell in love, and I started spending time with this one woman. But one thing I began to think about was the idea of somebody else, social, rather than it being the social, actually becomes sort of an energetic system. That rather than I want social confirmation, right? So the example I gave in this essay was, we were actually at hot springs, and there's a big meteor shower, and all these people are standing there watching the meteor shower. And every time this woman go by, they go, ooh, and they look at each other. It's just like, well, what? She kept asking me, why do people do that? What is it in that? I was like, well, to me, there's two ways to read it, right? And there's two modes of it. One mode is, did that really happen? Like there's something that excessive thing that tears at ego, that tears at identity, that tears at the fabric of the universe. There's shit flying through space, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. I want to confirm that it happened, and I want to sort of package it up and make it safe again, right?
Right.
So there's a safety in just saying, that happened, right? Yeah, that happened, rather than being alone with this sort of mystery.
Yeah.
But another way to see it, right, is rather than seeing it as social confirmation and participation and affirmation as a social being, there's also a kind of energetic flow, right? So we know this from certain people. Certain people drain you. Certain people enthuse you, vitalize you. And it's a kind of economic exchanges of energies. And I think there's something in eye contact and in a social participation in which you can create a kind of productive feedback loop in which you sort of drive the other one forward. You drive the other one's vitality. I've always seen the social as a suck on my vitality.
Okay, so the social confirmation, it might be a part of driving the person forward. So, yeah, I saw that, and I saw this. I mean, maybe if you don't even say anything, you look to the other to see what their emotional reaction is, or their physical stance, even just the way they position themselves and are looking, to kind of register a bunch of judgments, like, is this person afraid? Is this person excited?
Yeah.
Am I being, so you can see, I would think, my very cynical view is, you're looking up at the sky and you see the meteor shower, and it doesn't really register on you.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so you look to the other to see, okay, well, what am I, can I get confirmed in some sort of emotional reaction to what's supposed to be a wondrous thing, but which I am having difficulty accessing?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's right too. I mean, but either way, I think there's two ways of at least two ways. I mean, obviously there's more, but there's a social reckoning within the social, but then there's other human beings, which it need not be social per se, right? That introduce other kinds of opportunities of going with, other kinds of, just the way I read a book and my heart pounds, or I see a meteor shower, my heart pounds, or I see the Grand Canyon, or, there's the ocean, or the sky, right? Those are these moments of sublimity, right? These moments that sort of take you out of yourself, right? That's what's beautiful about the sublime, is it ruptures, right? It ruptures and gets rid of ego, and you feel kind of a connection and a flow and the energy coming in from other places. The sun. I mean, the sun is, I'm reading a lot of Bataille recently. The great image of Bataille, right, is that the sun's constantly kind of jerking off on the earth, right? It's just this relentless flow of energy. The sun just keeps giving you its seed over and over. Mm-hmm. And it's just this excess of energy. And so I think there's a way of going with other people that is very difficult, but that is not social per se, but sort of energetic or cosmic. If that makes sense. I know it sounds fruitcake, but I don't know another word for it.
Well, see, I think I might have the Nietzschean streak in me, because I would think that if you are encountering the truly sublime in something that's truly overwhelming, that you would be taken out of the social at that moment. You would be, you would lose yourself and therefore your position within a network of human relations at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sex, I think the erotic in general offers that opportunity. Again, Bataille is really turning me on to how obvious this is, right? That in the moment of orgasm and sex, you really, really begin to lose sense of yourself, of your own body. What's the beginning and limits? What is my ego even? Right? And this relentless flow of pleasure giving, pleasure receiving, those things really begin to break down. As you sort of, and it's almost a Merleau-Ponty phenomenological chiasmus, this intertwining, right, of seer and seen. And at that point, to me, it's what's incredible about the erotic is, and this is Bataille's argument, right, that the social is constantly trying to regulate it. But that and he calls he says, he talks about the erotic and the religious. Religion and sort of taboo are these two modes of trying to rein in the sublimity of the religious state, the ecstatic state, and the erotic state. But they are these sort of frenzied states that sort of take leave of ego, take leave of the social, that threaten to disrupt the social. So we're constantly trying to hedge it in these various ways.
I have my wife is in nursing school now, and she's a good portion of the time working with patients now, because she's working as a student nurse technician, when she's not actually at school. And then when she is at school, she does what's called clinicals, where she spends the day with other nurses and with actual nurses dealing with patients. And she'll come back, and she works at the VA hospital half the time. And she'll come back describing these older patients who are disoriented, who are in and out of understanding who they are and what year it is, and what's going on. She'll describe scenes where, like for instance, a man had a catheter in, and he had a direct line, had an IV going to what they call the central line, which is right to your heart.
All right.
And he had a kidney replaced, a new kidney installed. He woke up in the middle of the night and just thought he had to go to the bathroom, and just started ripping on all these things that are poking out of him, all the IVs and lines and all that. And my wife runs in the room and is trying to stop him, but he's not in the same space as she is. He's in his own. He's maybe closer to the sublime. He's reacting. Yeah. And her job was to ground him, to bring him back into the hospital, to bring him back into this very bureaucratic and orderly system, and to stop him from tearing a line out of his body that was connected to his heart and could do tremendous damage if you just ripped it out. So it's interesting, because we kind of revere these mystical states, but they're also sometimes the states of sickness and of retreat and of death.
Yeah, I mean, a therapy is obviously a madness and therapy, schizophrenia are these sort of hot items, right? And I began to realize in the therapeutic model is really about recreating the bourgeois subject, right? So if you come in manic, you come in crazy, it's all about getting you back to being productive, getting you back to your job, back to your wife, back to your mortgage, back to being a good, disciplined citizen of the social.
Yeah.
And of course, this totally freaked Guattari out, right? And Guattari was a psychotherapist, was like, I think there's another way to do this, right? So his whole thing was, the therapist's job is not to return you, but to create new lines of flight for you, make new lines of possibility. So you come in with the opening of Anti-Oedipus is, the schizophrenic is not on the couch. Annie Lizon should be on the couch next to the therapist. It's the therapist following the schizophrenic out for a stroll. Where do they go? Following them, leading them, which is actually what my book's a lot about. Reading is following where something goes, rather than trying to categorize it or pin it down or define it. So he really created this whole other sort of therapeutic model and these institutions in which, there was woodworking and gardening and all these other things you could do, these other kinds of spaces. You just even think about the therapeutic space, right? It reproduces the living room, right? I mean, the architecture is bourgeois.
Yeah.
And the couch and the chair and the desk, right? It's all the things. I mean, you're in this space. Imagine going into a therapeutic space and there's a jungle gym and there's guns and hammers or, bouncy balls. I mean, think about the various, very different kinds of ways you could construct a therapeutic space.
Right. Well, there are spaces like that for therapy, but there's not psychological therapy. It's not psychoanalysis. It's, usually physical therapy or occupational therapy.
Yeah. And again, it was just about getting you back to work, right? I mean, those literally, quite literally, it's called occupational therapy. I mean, it's like a fucking joke, right?
But you go into an occupational therapy space, and what you find are bouncy balls and jungle gyms and all sorts of equipment for you to physically work on, to kind of reorient yourself.
Bourgeois culture is pretty good at this. I mean, capitalism is pretty good at this, at taking the things that would break its structure apart and deploying them to its own ends. So that's one example, right? So play should be more sort of pervasive, right? But instead, it's when you're injured, we'll let you play to get you back to no longer playing. It's the rise of microdosing psychedelic drugs.
Oh my God!
Right? I mean, the whole point of LSD is the sublime, right? Is that you are ruptured. You're post-ego. You're pre-ego. You're the non-I, and it's so outside all the constraints and rigorous discipline of the workspace. And what's happened? It's the key to entrepreneurism. Right? The rise of nootropics. And all these great little amino acids and vitamins, and I've been messing around with them. They're all legal, and and some of them are quite fun, and fun. They're conducive to certain behaviors, but I don't want it to go back to work, which is how they're always built. So entrepreneurs that every one of these ads for these things, even ayahuasca now, right?
Ayahuasca,
ayahuasca. Co-opted by Silicon Valley.
Yeah, but you don't microdose ayahuasca, do you?
No, I mean, I don't know how much to talk about certain things.
No, I'm not saying you, but I mean,
I know people who have I mean, the active ingredient really in there is DMT, and I know people who have tried and sort of given up because they weren't getting what they wanted.
Do you know anyone who's done microdoses of LSD?
I do.
And have they reported that it's actually conducive to doing, I don't know, programming work or kind of high intensity concentration work?
Yeah, I mean, people I know who are not applying it to the workspace.
Okay,
they're applying it more to just a program of openness, keeping themselves open to the world, and joyous and glued into other energies rather than sitting at a desk and working. But I know that's how a lot of people are doing it. I'm pretty far. I mean, I don't really know people who work like that. I was thinking about most of my friends work like I do. I'm in my fucking pajamas, right in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah. I know that story. There's an upside to that, and there's definitely a downside to that. The downside is you're never not working. Yeah,
it's true.
In a way.
Yeah, you learn. I mean, I've learned recently how to just turn shit off. I just turn shit off. But that's taking a lot of time and a certain confidence, in that somehow money will come at some point.
Yeah.
I was always like, fuck, I got to take that, keep the money rolling. At some point, it's like, well, maybe money's going to stop. I don't know. But that's another.
Right. Well, yeah. The thing about freelancing is, for me, my impulse is always take on more projects than I can actually manage.
Of course, yeah, me too. Yeah, I never say no.
Right.
Same way, same thing.
And I don't feel like I even have enough, even though I always have too much.
Yep.
Because I'm never at a point where if one of my projects falls away, I'll be financially where I want to be.
Yeah, well, this is back to our, you and I talked a long time ago about indebted man.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's contemporary culture. That's what capitalism has us, right? You're working more than you can possibly work, and it's not enough.
Yeah, right.
But that's the debtor relationship, right? You're never enough. You're never paid off.
Yeah, no, you can't be.
You're always in debt to the system. You're always in debt, and you're always about to be shut down. You're always about to be thrown in debtor's prison. You're going to lose your home. You're going to not, you're going to be screwed one way or another.
And the thing about that is, it even applies to the capitalist class, not personally as much, but to the institutions.
Yep.
I mean, now more than ever.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe 5 years ago more than ever, because you had these institutions that are going into debt in order to expand their production or just to maintain their production.
Yeah. Yeah, it all drives it, right? I mean, it's the why. I remember a million years ago, I remember when JetBlue, I remember first flying JetBlue. Mm-hmm. It was the first time. You're like, oh, flying could be kind of normal. Everyone was sort of normal on the airplane, and it wasn't all this weird formal culture. And I remember when they decided to go public, and reading an article about that, it's like, what is that will? You have this highly profitable, highly successful company. Why do you need to keep going? What's that will to keep growing? And it's the fact that we even have Wall Street, the fact that we have these public exchanges, right, of stock, which is one thing I would eliminate in my world, if I were king. But it precisely for this reason, right? Because it's nothing's ever enough.
Well, this is where Marx is really useful, because he can explain exactly why, in mechanistic detail, there's a will to expand, a will to reinvest, a will towards the infinite when it comes to the production of profits and the expansion of production. There's this whole little circuit. It's a tiny little circuit, the M to C to M1 or M prime. I always say M1 because I'm so illiterate. It's M to C to M prime circuit. So it's money to commodity to money and a surplus. More. And
this is so two things I think of right there. Right, one is it was William Burroughs talked about the zero sum game. Right, any system that's built on quantification, you'll never have enough. He talks about the junk equation, and capitalism, the same thing. This equation, you'll never have enough. There's always a will to more. Because how can you? What's enough in a system that's built on quantification? It's the very premise of the TV show The Wire, right? It's all about this argument against quantification. It's all the numbers. What are the numbers? Do we make the right numbers of arrests? Did we pass the right number of kids who can read? There's no qualitative assessment of human life. It's all quant. And with quant, humanity goes by the wayside. It also makes me think of Bataille. And, Bataille, Bataille's my new obsession. It was Bergson before, now it's Bataille. Bataille's obsessed with this terms of economy and how discussions of economy generally get reduced to economic theory. And he's like, well, that doesn't account for – that's just one piece of what he calls the general economy, which is all these flows of energy, right? And that, capitalism will have us assume certain things of what to do with surplus. So he has this great moment in, what the fuck? I think it's in The Accursed Chair, where he says, the person who gets all this excess, like they build the pyramids. They build the pyramids with it, right? Or the person who like works and then buys booze and is sated. That's a good day's work. I'm done, right? My excess goes to my pleasure. My excess goes to this monument. My excess how is that excess expressed? And capitalism excess always gets put back into creating more. There's no such thing as excess. Excess always has to be retooled for productivity to make more, as opposed to ever actually being enjoyed, right? And he says there was a historical shift where excess was produced in order for enjoyment or in order for ego growth, right? So you have on one hand you have the pyramids. There's my big ego. We have all this excess. I'm going to build a fucking pyramid. I'm going to build a big statue to myself. Capitalism wouldn't do that.
Well, only if they could put a theme park around it or charge tickets.
Make money on it. Yeah. Or build a big. Yeah, what they would do is build the largest skyscraper with offices.
Right.
Right. It's never just And that's why you even get in the rise, at least here in San Francisco, and I think in Brooklyn, my guess is everywhere, is, Mark Zuckerberg lives in the Mission, right? Old money just wanted out, right? Let's go get an estate. Let's go live somewhere else. Let's go outside the city, outside the flow of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's all about, no. I'm in the Mission, man, and I just get my house, and I make all this money, and then I get on the bus, go take me right to Google. It's all about constant productivity. Leisure is co-opted too, right? I mean, that's obviously the Google campus, right? You do everything on campus. I think we've talked about this before, and it's there's no life outside of it. So in the social, there's still what's happening, right? It's all excess. All work that can create a possibility of excess, which of course is eliminated through the debt model, right? Through your mortgage and your car payments. But any sense of excess, even any local excess, I have a little money in the bank. It's all put into creating more productivity, investing it, making more money. It's always, there's no enjoyment.
Well, it's all very secular too, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
The thing about the pyramids is these were monuments for the dead emperors, and they were like portals to the underworld. Or to the beyond. Yeah. And the surplus that we create now is all just turned back towards the world as it is. That's the kind of crass materialism of our society. We have nothing that's beyond this world.
Right. And there's nothing else to be had, right? And there's nothing, but even just enjoyment. I've such a great scene again in the book. It's just like, a guy has a drink. Puts his money toward drink, not to go get drunk, just for it's not that we know well the drunk who goes to the bar because he's so miserable, right? He's talking about just the enjoyment of the fruits of your work, right? Expenditure of excess without more productivity.
Getting these headaches.
I want to kind of ask you about how to read culture, or how to read the way of things, which was, the name of your book, and kind of put forward this approach that I have to reading the way of things, which I'm not sure if it's psychologically healthy or particularly intellectually justified, or it's something that I tend to try to shy away from. I work against, but it's very easy for me to fall into, especially if I am, say, smoking weed, which is legal in Oregon.
Yeah, here too.
So when I watch television movies, I tend to think that at times that these things are talking to me, or not necessarily to me specifically, but that there's the world outside of myself, which is working out a problem, and then that my inner thoughts and the world outside of myself are working together on something. Like, just to say it as I wrote it down, I feel as though there's some secret life going on, and that you can see bits of it in television shows, movies, pop songs, and it's this sort of esoteric move to try to fit all these little pieces together, and you come up with these sort of cranky, paranoid projections onto what you're watching. And maybe the most innocent example would be recently the way I've approached watching Mr. Robot, because I feel like it's a show that's trying to work out the problem of how to have a revolution on multiple levels. And of course, that's something that I'm, professionally interested in, which is sort of weird, and also something that I've been interested in personally for a long time. But it's obviously also a major theme of the show. It's not hidden, but the levels that I'm reading into it, I think, might not be consciously on the minds of the producers of the show. Another show like that is Lost, which I thought was trying to teach me about the secrets of ideology and the relationship between human ideology and community and the mystery of the universe itself. But the key to it is not so much what it's about, but the relationship that I have. My final example is I went to see a James Bond movie. I forget which ones, but one of the more recent ones, with Daniel Craig, right? I thought this is about how to be a man, and especially a Western man today, and about the failure of that project, and it's teaching me. It's trying to overcome the failures, and it's teaching me what the masculine is, and all of this sounds all very critical theorist, sort of cultural theory, cultural critic kind of thing. It's justified in the way when I say it now, but the experience of it was not that rarefied or abstract. It was like, like I was actually being communicated with. Like,
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So
that's beautiful. I mean, that's what my whole book's about. I mean, right? You everything as you're reading things creatively because you're feeling them. They're coming through you. I mean, that's a rhetorical reckoning, what you just described to me, right? You're feeling these things. You're seeing it at all these levels from you sitting there on the couch, stoned, watching this thing, seeing it spiral out, how you were trained to be man in culture, TV shows, movies, billboards, you see it all connecting. You're making those connections. It's winding itself out and creating this argument that you see at play. To me, that's such a joyous moment. Even if you're reading something really darkly, the moment of that reckoning, a moment of seeing all that sort of spiral and tendril and connect and interconnect, and is to me always sort of exhilarating. I love reading something, having that moment. You're watching some TV show. I had this with The Walking Dead. I suddenly realized it was all about post-capitalist modes of territorialization, Deleuze and Guattari's sense, right? It's trying to imagine the end of capitalism, and various terms of construction, various terms of order, various ethical terms. What happens to the ethical? What happens? Different modes of social organization. It's like the minute you have that, you're like, oh my god, and they're all freaking seeing it all. It's an exhilarating moment, I think. So you just ripped 3 in a row, and I want to read that book. I want you to write each one of those essays.
Right.
These little readings of things, that was right. Like Roland Barthes' Mythologies, which I think kind of fails, has a great idea, but his readings are not that interesting for the most part, which is funny because he's so freaking smart. But I love these little readings of things. Reading a Lost quickly. I mean, I didn't even remember watched it, and now I want to watch it.
Well, they're different. I mean, there's the kind of reading that is treating myth the way Roland Barthes does, where you're trying to ground your reading in an understanding and or interpretation of the world that's worked out. And there's the kind of reading which is the reading of a mystic, where you don't have the guardrails of a method. You just have an emotional, maybe psychological response, and maybe a background of certain kinds of knowledge. So like one thing that comes to mind that just struck me this morning as I was preparing to talk to you was there was this approach to reading the media called synchromysticism that was around in the late aughts or late 0 years, as I like to say. So, and it developed into a little movement, and it was just about you'd watch TV and then you look for occult symbols, and you'd follow actors and actresses from one movie or television series to another and see where the occult symbols pop up in the in each product. Like you watch K2 and then you watch The Craft, with Robin Tooney, I think her name is, and then you start to see a mystical, esoteric message below the surface of these pop cultural phenomenon. I guess the truth is there is a methodology in every case. It's just one is grounded in materialist or political or a philosophical tradition, and one is more of a religious, occult, mystical tradition.
Well, I think what you're talking, I see how you got there based on the essay I wrote, right, on rhetoric, right, on the empirical, right, and it's, obviously in my book I talk about exemplary reading, which is reading everything as a symptom of something else, versus immanent reading, which begins from the thing. And the immanent reading is this rhetorical reading because it's always positional, right? So you're sitting there, you're saying, yeah, I'm having this emotional connection. And then you talk about a background of knowledge, but that's not a background of knowledge. That is your knowledge, whatever you know, whatever you happen to know. You're sitting there, you know what you know. And it might be, Marcuse and Adorno, or it might be, plumbing. It might be how to flush a toilet, snake a toilet and Adorno, or neither, or basket weaving. It doesn't really matter, right? You bring whatever you have, and there's always this moment where you're necessarily going with the thing in front of you, the James Bond movie, and I think people look for different things and they go in with certain ideological assumptions. This is just entertainment, whatever the hell that means, right? But that's their life. Power to them. Whatever. I don't. My life probably won't intersect there, so it doesn't really matter. Right. I think I love that you put it in these sort of mystical terms, which is kind of how I see it. But I will sometimes call it empirical. Which throws people off because empiricism is generally thought of as quantitative, right? As material. Empirical and materialism, I think, are too often thought together, sort of accidentally conflated, where they have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. Right? The empirical is just simply experiential. It's just, that's what's happening. I'm just sitting here watching it. I'm experiencing, perceiving it. It's not necessarily watching it. I don't need eyes, right? It's just, it's a perceptive immersion in something.
Yeah.
That's why I call it immanent reading, right? And I think there's ways to teach that, and there's ways to foster that, and there's ways to encourage that. And I think, again, you riffed off 3 right in a row, which is like, for me, is just like the dream, right? Like that's all I want all the time is just these little nasty readings of things like, oh, that's cool. Right. And I would love to, and there's different ways you could parse that. So I could have the Doug Lane book, right? You read Lost and you read James Bond, you read all these different things. Right. But then you could also have the book on Lost, which has an essay by Doug Lane, an essay by, me, an essay by whatever, and all these different readings of the same thing. Right. And so that thing almost becomes like a cubist. Lost becomes almost like a cubist painting, right? It's all these different facets.
Yeah. I tend to like the first version, of course, not because I'm writing it, right? But I like the version where you have one interpretive framework taking on a variety of subjects or objects, I guess, rather than this multiplicity of different theories applied to the same thing. Because the problem is, if you find yourself grooving with one interpretation, it's very difficult to put that framework aside and come back to you're going to just end up saying, well, this essay is a lot less interesting than the other one, whichever one you ended up siding with.
Yeah.
So just aesthetically and through, as a matter of experience, look, no one actually reads all of these big fat collections of essays about the pop cultural phenomena. They just read the little bits of it.
The one they like. Yeah.
And right. So why not just, have some balls and take a position, for Christ's sake, we believe this framework is true and we're going to apply it, rather than we have no idea what the framework is, but here's all of our worldly knowledge and we're going to throw all of it in piecemeal at, this cultural artifact, which, by the way, has its own theoretical framework, which has its own position that it's starting from. It is its own way of working out probably many of the same. I mean, that's why you can write about it. It's working out all these issues.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and it will always have its own excess, right? Which is the great thing from Freud, right? That you'll always exceed. You'll never explain yourself, right? There's always the symptomology there's always be an excess in your own self-explanation that you can't read. Right? It's the eye that can't see itself. Right? There's always a blind. You're always leaking your symptoms. Right. So, David Simon in The Wire might think he's doing this one thing and argue adamant that he's doing it. But, I think he's up to this other thing just because he says that. It always drove, students crazy, especially in, when we're talking about art. They always want to look at what does the artist have to say. And I think artists are generally really bad at talking about their own art. Why would they be good at it? It's not their skill at all. They make art. Why should they talk about their art? Right. I did a Q&A once. I led a Q&A at Berkeley with P.T. Anderson. So he was invited by some group, and they saw that I was teaching the movie Punch Drunk Love. This is before There Will Be Blood. He was in the making There Will Be Blood. So it was before his big breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. I love Punch Drunk Love, by the way.
Yeah, me too. And so I was teaching it, and so this group found me, like, will you host it? So I'm on stage with him, and all these people asking him lots and lots of questions about how you got the shot, how you do the shot, and I got bored. So I was like, I got to ask you about the collaboration with the artist Jeremy Blake and Punch Drunk Love and the use of these colors. I feel like there's a certain intensity to blues you chose, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going on and on and on about affect and form and the breakdown of character into pure flows of affect that are heated at good temperatures and colors. And I'm like, and he just looks at me and goes, I don't know, man. I just thought blue was cool.